Hi all, this is Kirti here, and I have total 16 years of experience now and 7 years across in agility. And I'm very happy to bring to you another set of interview questions which was shared by Sunand with me, and this is for the organization Salesforce. So let's get started. So the first question itself was your team is planning a major release that includes several new features and enhancements. How would you ensure that all release activities are planned and tracked effectively? So if you see the icon here, it's very important to, to cover all the parts of this release management process cycle, which is planning, building, testing, preparing, and then deploying, right? So the first thing what I have seen in my previous experience is it's very important to define the scope and objective. I know at high level people and stakeholders do know, but it is very important to communicate to the stakeholders, to the team and everybody that everything is clear in terms of scope and objective as what we are going to achieve as part of this release and maybe what we are not going to achieve, right? Even if it is part of the initial scope. So if there is a new application, so let's say, so in my current organization there was one requirement where the teams were working on the legacy applications, right? But then suddenly that was the decision was there to modernize that. Okay, so it was a huge, a mammoth task. So it was definitely a logical thing to break down into multiple releases. The first one was the MVP. So it was very important that the teams, the product owners, the stakeholders, everybody came out with a list of which features do we want as part of the MVP. So that is scope and objective done. Now, since this was a modernized one, it was very important to train the existing development team, which was working on the legacy system, to the AWS, React, and all those things, right? It was all needed to be. So the training and development plan was needed, though it was part and parcel of the development work which they were doing, but it was like, the planning and the time investing, the group studies and all things started in parallel. So that was the next step. Then like I mentioned, like scope and objective is done, then we try and break down into the user stories, which epics, which user stories, and so that it is effectively tracked and planned for the release. So that is the next plan, to create different milestones which can be achieved at various levels and not just at the end of the release. Now, what I like in Scrum or maybe anything which is agile is the risk which is organically, handled in the various events. So do have Scrum events and meetings, the daily Scrums, the sprint review, the sprint planning. So it helps us inspect and adapt at a timely manner, which helps us release quality product at the end of the release. And nothing is a sudden surprise for anyone that okay, why this part was developed, because we are all engaged across the release. It happens. So effectively managing all the scrum events really helps. The next thing is communication, the continuous communication which needs to be done with the stakeholders. So um, so now that the plan is released, the objective is clear. We have come out with the scope. We have a user story and everything in process. We can create effective dashboards and everything, right? We can use rich filters and create effective dashboards like how many user stories are done, how many are pending, what is the percentage currently. So this will help all the stakeholders to understand and also create an environment where the teams can communicate well and collaborate well with the POs. Create Teams chat or create whenever Slack tools, whatever you are using, create effective collaboration chats and everything where all the teams can communicate effectively across cross team dependencies also, which can be mitigated through that. So this really helped us, to effectively resolve our impediments without waiting much on mails and, waiting for the turnaround time. And especially we were across the, the US India time zone. So it was very difficult for us to wait on an email because it takes one entire day for the mail to come back. So the Teams chat was very effective and teams could collaborate easily. So continuous communication with the stakeholders within the development teams, within the dependency teams was very, very effective. The next thing is the environment readiness. Like, we immediately start developing, but all these things needs to be thought through, like the environment readiness, which environments are there, like dev, test, CI, or perf, prod, like to go to the prod, what all environment needs to be ready, all the requests which needs to be raised. So this is another a very critical thing. Now, when you are going to deploy, maybe there are UAT testing teams or the certification teams or the or various QE teams which needs to be engaged externally, which who will be doing the integration test other than your current testing which the development team itself are doing. So engaging all of them, communicating to them, creating a release plan definitely helps to effectively bring that to the closure at the end of the release. The next thing is identify risk and mitigation plan. So like I mentioned in Scrum, in events only you will get to know what are the risks. But let's say suppose our UI was dependent on someone else's API, which was parallelly building in the current release itself. So what we did was inform the stakeholders. We tested with the stubbed responses, but we ensured that we called that out in the review time and again that it's a stubbed response. And once the final API comes, we would need another time, some timeline to integrate it and provide the end demo. So what is your integration plan, what is your plan A, what is your plan B, or everything should be very transparent and clearly communicated. Now, once this entire testing and deploying happens in production, then the next thing is continuous improvement, to take feedback from everyone, how we can improve other than the team retrospectives what we have. So we can have a release level retro, which would really help us identify, like I mentioned, the API and the UI which was being parallelly built. So that caused actually a lot of delays. So what we decided was from the next release onwards, the API would go one sprint ahead. Okay, so that really helped us, to once by the time we were done coding, the API team was ready. So integration testing, no other time was integration testing was needed, and we could develop much faster. So these kind of improvements can come out once we are ready with our development. So this is about release management process. Now let's move to the um, next question. So your team is experiencing frequent build failures after code merges. How would you identify and resolve the root cause of these failures in CI/CD pipelines? So the first thing is, now in my previous organization, what I was actually actively involved in creating that particular CI/CD thing for the dev and with the DevOps team. So what happened was that the build was in fail state, but nobody cared to check and kept on committing their code. So it resolving one issues, it actually sometimes took 2 to 3 days, which was a big time for development to stop and not go into any other environment, right? So what we did was we immediately stopped, if there's a build failure, stop the commits only. So once the build is successful, only then people can commit. This was a rule which was deployed by the DevOps team. But the first thing we need, and the alert mail used to go, so that this build is failed, this is the error. So all this information was went on the mail, which helped us take immediate action. The next thing was analyze the failures, and also they also used to give a stat which was very helpful. Like build was stable 3 days ago. From 3 days, continuous build failures are happening. So that really helped us analyze what pattern are we seeing, where are we lacking in the code reviews, or what else we can do to fix that issue. So once those failures were analyzed, it was the code analysis or the dependency, or there was some team who was just used to update the library but never tested. So all these things caused the issues, and maybe in my local it's working, but in the somebody else's local it might not work. Somebody, like once it was integrated in this dev environment, it stopped working. So this kind of what config setups are different in local or in the CI or the dev environment. So those kind of parameter checks can be checked, so and corrected. So first we need to identify the root cause, then we need to engage the right teams. So let's say suppose I had mentioned that the library team used to update the libraries, and they used to move forward. So it was very important for us to engage them, fix it, and tell them the importance of what needs to be done to ensure that these issues do not happen. The next thing is, if the build is failed already, and if we are not reverting the code, the immediate fixes needs to be applied. So this is the immediate action part, what we can do. There is Another part which is like a preventive measure, if we use continuous integration tools like Jenkins or GitLab or CI/CD, like build a proper CI/CD pipelines to automate the validation process before merging. So let's say suppose you've coded in your feature branch, and then in the main branch, while merging it's causing the issue. So we can have the validation test done in your this feature branch only, and before merging code into the main branch, the issues could come out easily, right? So this is one of the preventive measure. The next thing is the best practices is the pair programming. Of course, the code review really makes it effective and help avoid build failures. The next thing is enhance build process and environment. Like like I mentioned that put as many rules as possible. Try to reproduce the issues locally. Try to the environments are consistent or not, parallel builds can be done or not, faster builds can be done or not, which helps us to identify issues quickly before actually getting too late in the cycle. Right? Then, like I mentioned, the mails and the feedback loops, like this kind of stats really helps us to identify what kind of issues are being faced. The next thing is share the knowledge. Whatever, like what we used to do was the issues what we got, we used to send a mail of the common issues to the entire team once the issue was detected. So this way we shared the knowledge, and it also was effective. If next time somebody else faced the issue, they could see those mails. So that was an effective one. And retros, definitely it's a good retro point to discuss. If there are a lot of build failures happening, what can be fixed at the environment level or at the code level to ensure this is not happen. Now, as a scrum master or as a TPM, these are the points which you should bring to the table when we are discussing with the teams, right? So having a know-how of everything really helps to ask the right questions. So this is the list of what changes we need. um, Okay, so the next question is, provide an example of how you improved release quality through the use of automated testing. What was the impact on the release process? So in my previous project, our team really faced, significant challenge actually with the release quality. Frequent bugs and regressions were slipping through into production, causing downtime and frustrating users. The manual testing process was time consuming and prone to human error, leading to delays in the release cycle. So what action was taken was we adopted a test automation framework. Let's say suppose if you're doing for the UI test cases, you can use Selenium or JUnit for your unit test or testing for your integration test. So this kind of frameworks really helps us build good automated test cases. And then we integrated with the CI/CD pipelines, which really helped to catch the issues before when it went into the main branch, which will be getting deployed. So it delayed the development cycle initially, but more and more people got accustomed and writing quality codes and test cases. So that really helped us uh, with releasing the good quality codes. Okay. The next thing was it should be like if you're integrated in the CI/CD, it will be in continuous integration mode, which will help us identify issues beforehand. uh, there and now when you use such tools, like you can use the automated reporting tools also, like which gives us a stat and which gives us a clear picture of where we need to solve. So in my organization there has been like there is a QE team specifically who does that integration testing kind of a thing in the test end also, and they release weekly reports. Like there are multiple engines who are dependent on each other, and once if so they are all microservices, but then they are coupled in a way that if there's a feature and developed across all, then everything needs to be deployed by each of the services. Otherwise, in production, the end result will not be seen. So this kind of integration helps us, to identify and this kind of reporting helps us to identify which particular area needs which of the open defects which needs to be fixed and all those things. And strengthening the automation test cases really helps. Now let's say suppose we have developed something in one cycle and that everything is manual. The next cycle again you have to test something which was previously developed plus the new development. So the manual testing cycles will increase and the automated test cases or automated testing would definitely help us reduce the manual toil a lot. So the impact of release process was the bug count actually reduced by 70%. So that was, it helped, it brought in developer efficiency, the productivity got increased. We could, the data driven decisions could actually help us identify which engines needs to work on which of the more cases. And so this really helped us streamline the process and reduce the cycle times. So moving on, next question was, share an example of how we handled a situation where a critical deployment caused production issue. What steps you took to mitigate the steps and prevent future occurrences? Okay, so this is also related to now this happens day in day out. The first thing as a Scrum Master or a TPM or a position is to take the immediate action of whether it's mobilizing actually the response team who is responsible, like from dev, QA, testing, production, support, stakeholders. Everybody should come on a call and they are your response team, and the decision should be taken whether to revert the code or whether to um, how do we address the critical issue, right? Whether to revert the code or whether to apply a fix. So if there is something for which a fix can be, whichever is shorter and whichever has a lesser impact, the next thing is we should do that, right? Now there can be various alerting tools. So it is also important to write your Splunk dashboards or queries to identify if there are, degradations happened after the release cycle. So this can only be achieved once everything is monitored into the post the release, right, or post the deployment. So before and after, maybe the transaction rejection count has started increasing. So that's also an alarm. So that ways your alerting should be very strong enough to call people when such kind of issue happens. Now, as a Scrum Master or a TPM, your primary role is to have this facilitation and have this decision come across very clear and strong. Now, the challenge what we face is, since there are so many heads in there and there is a production issue, people start pinpointing, people start first accusing, maybe it happens. So the first thing is to keep yourself focused and your group focused on finding the issue and the resolution first, whether it's some kind of scripts deployment or some kind of workarounds or whatever. So the next thing is the proper analysis of the root cause. Now, what case I faced was, there was one database query which went as part of the release cycle, and though it was reviewed by DBA, but it was maybe the review process itself was not strong or whatever the case was. We still faced issue, right? So we strengthened the release process itself very much. If there are user stories which are having DB queries, major DB queries, or any small query also, we started putting a label as DBA approved label. So once that is done and the comment by the DBA comes in that yes, they have reviewed, then only we used to close the story. That this helped us improve the our process, okay, and also avoiding issues going forward. The next thing is, what I would like to call out is to create a psychological safety. People do make mistake, but penalizing or such kind of things or calling out the names really brings the morale down. So try and ensure that this thing is handled and this thing is taken care of. What preventive measures we can take, right? Like I explained, we can improve the process, or we can, the another issue what we faced was the test case was there in the repository when the war testing was happening, but it was at a very low category, so that was not executed. So because of the time shortage, or only the high priority test cases were executed. So those kind of analysis of what testing needs to be done to ensure all the edge cases are also being covered, that kind of uh, that would really help. Now again, this is circling back to the previous one, previous question. The automated test cases here really helps, the effective ones really helps us to bring uh, code quality in place. And manual testing definitely brings a lot of value, but it delays the process a lot. So it only things which cannot be automated at all should be manually tested. That should be the goal for the entire Scrum team. So yeah, so if there are alerting which needs to be modified, if there are monitoring tools which needs to be modified, or there are test cases which needs to be revisit, whatever it takes, the preventive measures, so that the next future releases we do not have any such issues, this should be implemented. So this was about if there is a critical deployment caused in the production, what steps we would take, right? The next question is, our release depends on external teams delivering their components on time. How do you manage these dependencies and ensure coordinated delivery? So the first thing is very important is this both goes hand in hand, the cooperative planning and the effective planning and collaboration. Like I mentioned in my previous example also, so there was an API team which were building in parallel to the UI team, and we tested with the stuffed responses. It was not accurate. We faced a lot of issue when we went into the war after the integrated codes with the APIs, because there was hard timeline issues as well. So this kind of things really help, that brings visibility to people also that this issue happens. So I always take it as an opportunity that issues should happen. So once it happens, then when we next time we suggest some solution, it really, people are in the listening mode, because nobody wants issues in production, right? So facilitate a communication, engage all the teams who are there as part of the dependency and the stakeholders. What kind of planning do we have in place? If there are any dependencies, please call that out, because that will bring transparency and visibility, which is very, very important. Call out the risk upfront that this can cause an issue, but we would need an extra 10 days to do the integration test or something like that, right? Now, continuous collaboration can be done by creating the Teams chats or the collaborations. You can use any Slack tool or anything where you can continuously talk to each other. Like I mentioned, we should not wait if there are global teams, especially, and we should not wait and depend only on mails. We should make it as informal as possible. There is no room for highlighting things on mail or anything. But and once, if I am dependent on somebody else's API, and that API is not going to come, I should have a plan B, that what else we can take up to complete the release or development. It should not always be like, we are blocked. So it can, and if that is the case, then it should be effectively communicated to everyone, because most of the time people do work on their most priority and not somebody else's topmost priority, right? So this clear communication, transparency, and visibility really brings everyone into the single group, and it has really helped me many a times when I have approached teams. They have come up with their when we call them out directly that yeah, we are stuck and we are blocked and we will not be moving ahead. They take things very seriously, and then they solve issues for us, right? So communication is the key here, which really needs to be clear and precise. Now, if things are not working, you should always know what's your escalation path, right? If the things are not working, that team is really tied up, you should know the escalation path, whom next to we can escalate. It's not more like an escalation, but a visibility of your issue to be brought to the stakeholders, right? Like I mentioned, if there is a blocker or anything, there your contingency plan should be there. What next? If not, then what? So that kind of plan really helped us take up features which were less dependent, and still timely deliver once the APIs were brought to us. Um, so, and there can be cases like, it is important to communicate to the stakeholders, the clients and the PMs, that such kind of dependencies, we are still meeting targets. But in case things does not work as per the plan, there can be a change in the release schedule. And like we are agile, we cannot plan for 6 months ahead. Per month basis, that such kind of decisions should take place, and we should have that collaborative environment, right? Um, like I've covered almost all the point. We should have a cooperative planning, and we should be flexible with our timelines and everything. Okay, so moving on. Your team is transitioning to infrastructure as code using tools like Terraform or CloudFormation. What help what steps would you take to ensure a transition? So, like I mentioned in my previous one of the examples, also, like my team was working completely on legacy and then they moved completely on the modern space. So, the first thing what we did was in the retros, we discussed how do we go about it. We started with group studies, understanding the current state, arranging workshops and trainings. So, that really helped. And plus, the organization should also help upskilling programs, Udemy Business, or anything which people can, motivate people to take up comprehensive trainings. So HashiCorp certified Terraform Associate or AWS certified DevOps engineers, these two certificates would really help teammates to transition to infrastructure as code. So, uh, so the next important thing is once the team is at the skill level, at least at the basic skill level, that they can take up this work, set clear objective what we are trying to achieve and by when. So by when should be defined by the team, but what we are trying to achieve should be very clearly communicated to the team, and they should have the vision and the goal very, very clear. Now, there should be a phased approach. Not everything should be moving to infrastructure as code. We should have a planned, phased, wise approach, what we can take and when. Um, Develop your coding standards, right? What are the standard established coding standards and conversations for writing ISC scripts to ensure consistency? Use version controls because when the team is new, it is very important that the rollbacks can happen quickly. So we can have something as Git or anything where we can have version control system enabling the teams to revert their codes or track the changes, right? As much as possible, the modelization should be there where create reusable modules to promote code reuse and simplify management. So these kind of things really helps us get to that state. Now, once we are there, we can use Terra Test or AWS Cloud Formation Guard to test what we have developed. So now infrastructure as code is really, really beneficial. So let's say suppose your entire uh, thing, you need to build everything from scratch. So this kind of scripting and building the entire infra through scripts really helps. So but once that is done, it is important to monitor and log, right? So proper error code should be there, erroring it out, and raising alerts and monitoring should be in place. Now, once this is done, definitely one or two members of the team would be doing this, or the entire team would be doing this. The knowledge sharing with the larger groups, the wider groups, really helps, right? Once that phased out approach is done, then we can plan a full scale implementation. Okay. If there are risks, there should be a plan B, like I mentioned, and the review process should be taking place, like what we could do better. That is the core of Agile, and it really helps us introspect and be better versions of ourselves. So yeah, that's about if your team is transitioning to infrastructure as code or any other new tech, right? What are the what are the steps which we can take? So the next is a critical defect is discovered during the final stage of the release. How would you handle this situation to ensure minimal disruption and timely delivery? I can't count the number of times this has already happened, because as soon as we are going to go in the prod, just that the last day, the second last day, a critical defect might turn up. But it is a very clear communication from the top management also that stability is the first thing which everybody would at the organization level is looking at. So if something is not, if and the ideology which I've learned from my previous teams also and my mentors also, that if something new is not working, it's fine, it's not going to create a chaos, but something which is existing in production or anywhere should not break, and that is the level of the reviews which should happen. But if still this happens, what the first step we need to do is communicate and coordinate, like what is the priority, right? If it is very, very critical, the release has to stop. That is very, very clear. The release has to stop, the defect has to fix, the defect has to be fixed. The testing and validation needs to take place. All the stakeholders needs to be involved with a go no go decision. the risk assessment needs to be done. What is the risk if this fix is does not go? So all those kind of decisions needs to be done. And like I mentioned, if I am there as a scrum master or as a TPM, I definitely try not to go with something which is untested. I just ask the right questions, and I try and influence teams to take the right decision in terms of what to do about the defect. And such kind of defect happens, the priority is so high that everybody comes on their toes and fix it immediately also. So if it is something which is fixed, then we are good. But post release monitoring and retrospective is also very important. Once the release is done, then the various alerting and the Splunk dashboards or anything that needs to be monitored, that is utmost important for us to have a stable release.